Impact of the war on civilians. So, economic impacts. So we had the War Tax Act in Britain, which basically just got as much money as possible from the civilians to help fight the war. In March 1941, Bevan, who's one of the cabinet ministers, introduced the Essential Works Order, which basically said you have to work where we tell you to work. You're now working in a factory that makes munitions. You've got 2 10-hour shifts in 3 days. Go off, on you go, on your bike. Food and rationing. All civilians were given ration booklets. The Battle of the Atlantic prevented having many commodities such as sugar, tea, fruit, oil, and rubber. So throughout it, the Battle of the Atlantic was where German submarines mainly fired on the ships coming across the Atlantic Ocean from the US. Okay, so then what did they what tactic did the US use to try and they eventually won this war? Try to stop it? Anyone know? Starting with C. They started sailing in. Starting with C. Groups. No, groups does not start with C. Convoys. They started going.
Did you say coffins?
They started going in convoys. So what they would do is they would have maybe 20 merchant ships, so ships just with stuff on it. Then you might have 3 or 4 destroyers or a battleship with kind of anti-submarine capabilities, and they would all go together. And the ships would protect the 20 ships as they went. That was kind of the tactic they used to try and stop the bombing. German civilians. Industrial network was set up to have maximum capacity. In 1943, they were forced into total war effort through the coordination of all human material resources by centralising state authority. So they started saying, no, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. There is a centralised state authority that is now in charge of total war, and anything that's not war-related they're not allowed to do. Okay, German citizens really were impacted very heavily because it started to cost them a lot. Same as World War I. It's not like deja vu, but 30 years later. By 1942, weekly allowances for every German was restricted to 2.2 kilos of bread, 3.4 grams of sugar, 400 grams of meat, and 340 grams of dairy fats. It's not that much, if you think about it. It's really not that much at all. They estimate during the winter offensives in Russia, when Russia was kind of about to start their huge spring offensives, they were given 4 kilos of food ration per day. Like 2 kilos of bread, a kilo of meat, and a kilo of various other things. Per soldier. So a lot. If you think about it, these guys are carrying maybe 20, 30, 40 kilos worth of stuff with them. They've got huge coats on, and they're walking through the snow most of the time. A lot of them got through most of it. So...
Was the 1942 weekly allowances for a family
Yeah.
or a person?
I think we find it was one person.
So if I have like a 5-person family, that's getting quite a lot of decent amount.
Actually, would it be per person? Maybe not. Oh no, every German. Not really. 100 grams of meat isn't much. If you're having 100 grams per...
400 grams.
Yeah, but it's over 7 days. You're getting 70 grams of meat a week. 2.2 kilos, it's kind of... Basically, that's saying you've got, what, 3 loaves of bread kind of thing? 4 loaves of bread? Less than 4 loaves of bread? Not much at all. Bombing. So the Blitz from 1940 to 41 killed 60,400 civilians and 2 million homes were destroyed. 10,000 children were evacuated into the countryside. In regards to propaganda, so we'll go Britain first, letters from soldiers were scrutinised. Photos of war zones and injured kids and dead soldiers were banned. You weren't allowed to take certain photos. Women from 1944, more than 90% of women were directly or indirectly involved in the war effort. But mostly they were volunteers. Mostly they weren't forced to, they volunteered to. And it makes sense that most of them had a son or an uncle or a dad or a husband fighting. So why would you sit at home and go, well, I could be helping him right now, but can't be stuffed today. You know, most of the volunteers went and helped. In Germany, the later use of carpet bombing destroyed mass civilian areas. So we talked, if you remember, about the bombing of Dresden, to 100,000 people killed in one night.
Wait, who bombed it?
The Allies,
How?
via planes, bombers. So, towards the end of the war, really, Germany was not able. The Luftwaffe was not able to fight against the RAF. They had such air superiority. They were almost bombing at will. A lot of them actually. So a lot of historians actually say that the bombing was quite ineffective, and it actually cost, like it really did cost a lot of Allied fighters' lives.
Wait, the German bombings or
The Allied bombings of German cities didn't do much, but they continued with it. By 1945, 3 million tons of explosives had fallen over Germany. 7.5 million homes were destroyed. 7.5 million homes. Okay, think about that when it comes to the idea of rebuilding. 7.5 million homes were destroyed. And we're not talking about like blown over by a tornado, where most of the materials are there and you can use that plus some other materials to remake your home. We mean just completely gone, pulverized. No, there was not insurance for an enemy bomber coming and destroying your home.
It's a valid question.
Anyway, can I take fighter bombing insurance, please?
Yeah.
Goebbels insisted on public posters and radio broadcasts announcing a new venture: be more than you appear to be. So be happier, work harder, be more than you appear to be. Don't be as sad as you look. If you're not feeling great, appear like you're feeling great. All right, so really it was having an effect if the propaganda had to start saying things like that. Okay, they really were worried about the demoralisation of people. Reasons for Allied victory, F. Plenty of reasons there. So, continual failures of Germany to knock Britain out, take Moscow in 1941, being defeated in Stalingrad, defeated in the Atlantic when they were trying to take advantage of the unpopularity of Stalin's regime. There were advantages for Britain, so the Allies controlled the sea. The Allies successfully bombed Germany. They gained control of North Africa, so therefore they had the Suez Canal and Middle Eastern oil to use, and obviously stopped Germany from using. Allied air control was very important. There was superior Allied political and military leadership. So if you remember, looking at the dictatorship of Hitler, it really wasn't a very well-run machine, even before the war. You can imagine once the war comes out. Yeah, you've got different little kingdoms and fiefdoms fighting and over against each other for control, rather than the Allies had a very set kind of, this person's in charge, this person's in charge, this person's in charge. All right? If the general said, I believe, to the politician, I believe this is the best course of action, 9 times out of 10 for the Allies, the politician listened. Whereas what happened in Germany? Hitler just went, well, I don't care what you say, we're doing this. Okay, so the experts, the military experts, said to Hitler, this is not a good idea, or we should do this. Often he did the opposite, or he did it anyway. Okay, so that was one problem. So, superior Allied political and military leadership and superior Allied intelligence. Okay, the Germans were pretty good, but Americans and the British were better. Bletchley Park is a famous area. They managed to decipher the Enigma machine. Has anyone heard of the Enigma machine? Okay, it was a famous German machine. Basically, it was a typewriter. You typed out the message. Each time you hit a button. I think there were maybe 8 different combinations of what it could have been. All right, so you type in. You might type 50 characters. That's 50 times 8 things that it could be. Millions of combinations. Off it goes, all jumbled up. Then you put it through the next. You have to have another Enigma machine. That Enigma machine deciphers it all and reads out what it is. It's brilliant, okay? Mathematically amazing. What happened? We captured one of them. We captured a machine.
So it was a German thing.
We captured it. It was actually on a submarine. We captured an Enigma machine on one of the submarines. So there's a movie about it. If you really want to go see it, U-571. U-571 is the submarine that the Enigma machine was on. And they captured one, so they were able to use it. And the Germans didn't know. Okay, so we really good intelligence, especially towards the end. Greater Allied production of war materials, as I was saying, the US. All right, brilliant. Other possibilities you could talk about, Germany's empire was too big to control. Okay, so they really, for a centralised machinery, they were really centralised in their power. They didn't say, you go and run Poland, you go and do this. They were kind of really centralised, struggled to control it and to use it in an efficient manner. Germany's liability of Italy as an ally. Italy sucked. Italy did not help them at all. Okay, so that was a problem. And finally, the Russian economic miracle. So they managed to move all of their production east of the Urals. Okay, so behind these mountains, that was their only real kind of natural defense, and kind of set them all up again. And they managed to do that in such a way, in such a manner that people said the Russian steamroller started. They managed to take and absorb all of the massive losses, millions, tens of millions of men. They absorbed that, and then they came back even stronger. Okay, churning out tank after tank, plane after plane of better tanks than the Germans. Yeah, the technology had taken over the Germans, because the Germans obviously they're working, but they're under kind of dodgy conditions a lot of the time. So they don't have guys, brilliant scientists that can work and try and work things better. So the Russian economic miracle. So, reasons for Allied victory continued. So Allies had control of the air. The Luftwaffe failed in the Battle of Britain and the Blitz. Allied bombing had a major effect on Germany's ability to sustain a war effort. The bombing of essential factories, industries, railway networks, they're all key factors which made it hard for the maintenance of the level of production that they had. Allies had control of the sea. So obviously the sea was still the main way you get supplies across. Originally the Axis powers dominated the sea, and for the first 3 years, Allied losses at sea that's supposed to be reached extremely high levels. However, at the end of 1943, the Allies began taking control of the sea. The Allies' control of the sea made it possible for the US to make a massive contribution to the defeat of Germany through the Lend-Lease program. War was lost on the Eastern Front. Germany failed to defeat the Soviet Union, which led to a dragged-out battle. The defeat of the battle at the Battle of Stalingrad meant the Soviet Union was able to mobilise, which as a result, the German forces were ground down. Allied victory was possible because of the intervention of the US. US had great human, economic and military resources, and the Germans were unable to compete with the Allied resources. Even before the US joined, the US were providing assistance to the British war effort. The American economy was able to produce far greater than Germany, and the military of the US was a key aspect of the Allied victory. Finally, weaknesses in the German system. Intentionalists believe the German system failed because of poor preparation, the failure to defeat both Britain and Russia, and the extensiveness of the war, which stretched Germans' resource capacity and capabilities. Structuralists believe the intentionalists make some valid points. However, they believe that the structure of the Nazi regime and the inner workings were the cause of the German failure. Things such as the lack of centralised control, economic inefficiency and rivalry, failure to immediately go to total war, and the obsession with racial issues diverted essential resources and manpower from the war. Finally, what historians are saying is the reasons for Allied victory. So Richard Overy's 95 book called Why the Allies Won discusses some key points into why. His arguments include failures of German organisation, the war in the air and the sea, Allied control of it, economic aspects of the war, and campaign and leadership. It's on page 164 of Cantwell, I believe. Thank you for listening.